Rain hammered the high desert like thrown gravel, turning dust into slick mud beneath the hooves of Caleb Hartman's horse. The storm came down out of the Black Hills without warning. Thunder cracked so close it rattled his teeth. Somewhere ahead, lightning split the sky and briefly revealed the narrow wash cutting through the land like a wound. Caleb leaned forward in the saddle, jaw tight, fighting the wind when he saw it. Something dark tangled near the edge of the ravine. His horse reared, nostrils flaring, refusing another step. Caleb pulled hard on the reins, heart pounding, as floodwater surged louder below. If he was wrong, he'd risk his life for nothing. If he was right and he turned back, someone would be lost to the water forever. He swung down anyway, boots sinking, rain blinding him, and ran toward the edge as the ground trembled under his feet. Hope you enjoyed this story. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear where you're watching from. Now, let's continue with the story. Years later, Caleb Hartman would still wake some nights with the taste of rain in his mouth and the sound of rushing water in his ears. He had survived that storm. His ranch had survived. His reputation had survived. But something else had been left behind in the dark, carried away by flood and silence, never properly buried, never truly gone. Caleb Hartman was known across Yavapai County as one of the richest cowboys in northern Arizona. His ranch stretched wide along the Prescott Valley, land baked hard by sun and stubbornness. He ran cattle the way other men ran numbers, precise, controlled, without wasted motion. People said he had ice in his veins and iron in his spine. They said grief had made him harder, sharper, and better at business. They were only half right. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, the bells of St. Agnes Church faded behind him as Caleb walked down Main Street with his son. The town of Prescott Hollow was small, the kind of place where every boardwalk creaked with memory, and every face had known you since you were young. Heat shimmered over the road, and the air smelled of dust, leather, and bread cooling in the bakery window. Caleb adjusted his hat and nodded to a few familiar faces. He did not stop. He rarely did. Work waited. Fences needed checking. Cattle prices and Flagstaff were dropping. These were solid problems, the kind a man could fix. Beside him, Luke Hartman walked carefully, clutching a small wooden horse in his hand. The boy was 7, thin and quiet, with eyes that noticed things grown men missed. He had carved the horse himself, sitting on the porch at night while Caleb balanced accounts inside. Luke turned the little figure over and over, thumb worn smooth against the wood. "Stay close," Caleb said, his voice firm but distant. "Yes, sir," Luke answered. They passed the general store where Mrs. Martha Collins stood sweeping dust off the porch. She smiled at Luke. He smiled back, shy but warm. Caleb barely noticed. His mind was already miles away, writing fence lines and weather reports. At the far end of Main Street, the pavement gave way to dirt and shadow. The trading post sat there like it had grown tired of pretending to belong. A few men lingered nearby, unemployed hands and restless eyes. They were not dangerous, just forgotten, worn thin by years that had taken more than they gave. A sound drifted through the heat, soft, broken, almost a song. Caleb heard it and dismissed it the way he dismissed most things that did not concern him. The world was full of noise. You learned which sounds to answer and which to let pass. Luke did not. He slowed, then stopped completely. Caleb took 2 more steps before the empty space beside him registered. He turned, irritation flickering across his face. "Luke," he said, "come on, we're heading home." The boy did not move. His wooden horse hung loose at his side. His eyes were fixed on the corner of the trading post, where shade pooled thick and dark. "Luke," Caleb repeated, sharper now. Luke looked up at him. His face was calm in a way that made Caleb uneasy. There was no fear there, no confusion. "Dad," Luke said quietly, his voice steady as stone. "That's Mama." The street seemed to exhale and go still. Caleb felt the words hit him like a blow to the chest. His first instinct was anger, hot and fast. His second was fear. Deep, sharp fear he had trained himself never to touch. "Your mother is gone," Caleb said, too quickly. "You know that." Luke shook his head. "No, sir." Caleb's jaw tightened. He remembered rain, remembered shouting into wind, remembered how the search had ended with nothing but mud and a folded shawl. He had done what a man had to do. He had survived. "You don't say things like that," Caleb said. Luke lifted his small hand and pointed. Caleb followed the line of that finger despite himself. A woman sat on the ground with her back against the trading post wall. An oversized coat swallowed her thin frame. Gray threaded through her dark hair, catching the light like ash. In her arms, she held a cloth doll, stitched from scraps, its face worn smooth by time and touch. She rocked slowly, humming the broken tune Caleb had heard moments before. She looked like no one. And then Caleb saw the scar, a thin white line traced from her temple to her cheekbone, half hidden by shadow. The sight stole the breath from his lungs. Memory surged up, sharp and unforgiving. A frightened horse, blood on skin, his own hands shaking as he told her she would be fine. He took one step forward, then another, heart pounding louder than the distant hammer of the blacksmith's shop. The woman's pale eyes lifted to him. They passed over his face without recognition, without warmth, without fear. "Do I know you?" she asked. Her voice was rough, worn down by weather and hunger, but the shape of it, the rise at the end, the soft pull of certain words, hit Caleb harder than the storm ever had. Luke moved closer to her, brave and small all at once. "Mama," he said gently, "it's me, Luke." The woman looked at the boy. Something flickered across her face, faint but real, like light behind a closed door. Her hands tightened around the doll. "You're a good boy," she whispered. Luke swallowed hard. "You used to say that?" Caleb stood there, the richest cowboy in the valley, unable to move, unable to breathe properly, staring at the past he had buried standing up in front of him. Shame crept in, slow and heavy. Not the clean pain of loss he had learned to live with, but something worse. The knowledge that he had stopped searching because hope hurt more than grief. Around them, life in Prescott Hollow began to stir again. A door creaked open. Someone whispered. Somewhere, a horse snorted. Caleb did not hear any of it. All he could see was the woman on the ground, rocking a doll like it was the last thing tethering her to the world, and his son standing between them, small shoulders straight, holding a truth too large for a child. Caleb knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that whatever came next would change everything he thought he understood. About loss, about strength, and about the cost of turning away too soon. And somewhere in the quiet space between one heartbeat and the next, the past began to demand an answer. Caleb did not remember deciding to kneel. One moment he was standing in the road, boots planted like iron, and the next, the dust was pressing into his trousers as he lowered himself in front of the woman. The world felt tilted, unsteady, as if the ground itself no longer trusted him to stand. Up close, she looked smaller than he had imagined. Hunger had narrowed her shoulders. Sun and wind had carved lines into her face that did not belong to the woman he remembered. Yet the shape of her mouth, The curve of her brow struck him with painful familiarity. The scar was real. There was no denying it now. "My name is Caleb," he said carefully, keeping his voice low. He did not reach for her. He did not dare. "I won't hurt you." The woman studied him with distant patience. "Most men say that," she replied. Her words were slow, like they had to travel a long way before leaving her mouth. Luke remained standing beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. Caleb noticed how the boy positioned himself, not blocking, not clinging, just present. It was the way Luke stood with frightened horses, letting them decide whether to trust. "What's your name?" Luke asked softly. The woman looked down at the doll, fingers rubbing its frayed arm. "I had one," she said. "Once." Caleb felt something twist inside him. He forced himself to breathe. "Do you remember where you came from?" She shook her head. "I remember water," she whispered. "Cold, loud. I remember holding something I couldn't let go of." Her eyes flicked to Luke, then away again, like the thought frightened her. Caleb closed his eyes for a brief moment. He saw rain slamming sideways, heard shouting swallowed by wind, felt the empty weight in his arms afterward. He had told himself the river took what it wanted and never gave it back. It had been easier than believing in maybes. A shadow fell across them. Caleb looked up to see Martha Collins standing a few steps away, her broom forgotten in her hands. Her face held neither surprise nor judgment, only a quiet sadness. "I've been bringing her food," Martha said gently. "When I can. She never asks. Just hums and thanks me like I've done her a favor." The woman frowned, embarrassed. "I don't want trouble." "You're not trouble," Luke said at once. Martha's lips trembled. "She's been here over a year." "A year." The word landed heavy. Caleb's stomach tightened. He had been alive and breathing for a year while his wife sat on the ground outside a trading post, forgotten. Caleb stood slowly. "We'll come back tomorrow morning," he said, more to himself than anyone. "With food, with blankets." "You don't have to," the woman said flatly. "Yes," Caleb answered. "I do." He took Luke's hand and turned away before his resolve could falter. As they walked, he felt eyes on his back. Whispers began to stir, light as dust. He did not look back, afraid that if he did, the woman would vanish like a trick of memory. That night, sleep refused him. The ranch house creaked and settled, every sound sharp in the dark. Caleb lay awake, staring at the ceiling, seeing her again and again, rocking, humming, holding a doll like it was a lifeline. Shame pressed down on him until it was hard to breathe. Before dawn, he was up. He cooked without thinking, hands moving on habit and instinct. Potatoes, onions, beef, seasoned the way Evelyn used to when the days ran long. He wrapped the food carefully, added apples, a blanket, a canteen. It was not enough. It would never be enough. Luke appeared in the doorway, fully dressed, eyes steady. "I'm coming," he said. Caleb nodded. They rode into town under a pale sky. The streets were quiet, the buildings still half asleep. The trading post looked smaller in the early light, rough and worn. She was there, awake this time, watching. Caleb dismounted and approached slowly. The woman did not shrink away, but her fingers tightened around the doll. He set the food beside her and stepped back. Luke held out an apple. "For you." She took it with both hands as if it might break. "Thank you," she murmured. She ate slowly, thoughtfully. With the first bite, her eyes softened. "I know this," she said. "This taste." "You used to make it," Caleb told her. The words shook, her rocking slowed. For a moment, she looked less lost, like someone standing in fog who could finally see a shape ahead. A door creaked. Tom Ridley leaned against the post across the street, a smile curling his mouth. "Didn't expect to see you kneeling in the dirt, Hartman." Caleb ignored him. Tom's eyes flicked to the woman. "Town's been feeding her long enough. Be careful who you claim, Caleb. Folks talk." Luke stiffened. Caleb turned then, his gaze cold. "Not today, Tom." Tom raised his hands in mock peace, but his eyes glittered. "Just warning you." When he left, the air felt tighter. Caleb helped the woman to her feet, steadying her gently. Her hand was cold in his, light as if she might drift away if he loosened his grip. "Would you come with us?" he asked. "Just to talk. To a doctor." Her body tensed at the word. Her breathing quickened. "No questions," she whispered. "No water." Luke stepped closer. "I'll stay with you," he said. The woman looked at him, searching his face, then nodded once. As they mounted up, Caleb felt the weight of eyes from behind curtains and doorways. He knew this was only the beginning. Questions would come. Doubts would follow. Men like Tom would not let this lie. But as they rode toward the doctor's office, the woman sitting stiff in the saddle and Luke watching her every breath, Caleb understood something with painful clarity. Tomorrow would demand more than food and promises. Tomorrow would demand answers. The doctor's office smelled of alcohol, old paper, and crushed herbs. It was a familiar scent in Prescott Hollow, one that carried both comfort and fear. Caleb had brought broken men and injured horses through this door over the years, but never anything as fragile as the woman who now sat on the bench against the wall, hands locked around her cloth doll like it was the only thing keeping her from floating apart. Dr. Samuel Reed closed the door quietly behind them. He was an older man, shoulders slightly bent, eyes sharp beneath heavy brows. He looked from Caleb to Luke, then to the woman, and stopped there. "Well," he said carefully, "this is unexpected." Caleb stayed standing, arms crossed, as if anchoring himself to the room. "She was found in town. I believe she's my wife." The doctor did not scoff. He did not smile. He simply studied the woman with professional calm. "Ma'am," he said gently, crouching to her eye level, "do you know where you are?" She hesitated. Her eyes drifted to Luke. "It's all right," Luke said softly. "You can tell him." The woman swallowed. "Inside?" she said. "Safe." Dr. Reed nodded. "Do you know your name?" Her fingers tightened around the doll. Her lips parted, then closed again. She shook her head once, ashamed. Caleb felt the answer strike him anyway. The doctor worked slowly. He asked simple questions, watched her reactions, noted the way her body stiffened at certain words. When he touched the scar on her temple, she flinched hard, breath coming fast, eyes going distant. "No rushing," Dr. Reed murmured, withdrawing his hand. "Trauma like this doesn't heal by force." After a long while, he stood and motioned Caleb aside. Luke remained with the woman, sitting on the floor near her feet, carving the edge of his wooden horse with careful focus. The sound steadied the room. "She's alive," the doctor said quietly. "That much is clear. She survived things that would have killed others. Cold exposure, head injury, likely starvation. Her mind adapted." Caleb's jaw clenched. "Can she come home?" Dr. Reed hesitated. "Yes, but listen to me. She may never remember everything. You can't demand answers. No crowds, no pressure. And if word spreads, it will," Caleb said flatly. The doctor nodded. "Then there may be trouble." Caleb did not respond. Trouble was a language he understood. They left the office under a sky thick with gathering clouds. The woman rode stiffly in front of Caleb, his arm secure but gentle around her waist. Luke rode close on the other side, eyes never leaving her face. At the edge of town, whispers followed them like dust. Faces appeared in windows, some curious, some doubtful, some sharp with judgment. Tom Ridley stood outside the saloon, watching them pass. He did not speak this time, but his expression promised that he would. The ranch appeared over the rise like a long-held breath. Fences stretched wide. The house stood solid and familiar, white boards glowing softly under the muted sun. As they rode into the yard, work stopped. Ranch hands froze, hats halfway lifted, eyes wide. Caleb raised his voice, low and firm. No crowd, no questions. Give her space. They obeyed instantly. Even men who feared nothing knew when a command carried more than authority. The woman slid down from the horse with Caleb's help. Her legs trembled like she had forgotten how to trust the ground. Luke reached for her hand without thinking. She took it. The house waited quietly. She stopped in the doorway, staring into the front room as if it might vanish if she stepped too quickly. "I remember light," she whispered, through a window. Caleb stood behind her, careful not to crowd. "You can take all the time you need." Inside, the air smelled of wood smoke and soap. Her gaze moved from the fireplace to the chair by the window. When she saw the quilt folded over the arm, her breath caught. "I made that," she said, wonder threading her voice. Luke nodded eagerly. "You did." She reached out, fingertips brushing the fabric like it was sacred. Her shoulders shook once, then steadied. That night, the storm came. Rain battered the roof. Wind pressed against the windows. Thunder cracked so close the house shuddered. The woman sat in the chair by the window, rocking unconsciously, the doll clutched tight. When the thunder struck again, she gasped, body folding inward. "Water," she whispered. "Cold." Luke was at her side instantly. "Look at me," he said, voice calm and clear. "You're here, you're safe." Her eyes found his. The rocking slowed. Caleb built the fire higher, hands shaking despite his control. "It's only rain," he said gently. "The river is far from here." She watched him then, really watched him, as if trying to see past the present into something deeper. "I don't want to forget again," she said. "You won't be alone," Caleb answered. "Not ever." Morning came clear and sharp. By midday, a wagon rolled into the yard. 2 men climbed down. Sheriff Collins, stiff-backed but uneasy, and a stranger with clean boots and papers tucked under his arm. Caleb stepped onto the porch, dread settling heavy in his chest. This was not over. It was only beginning. The men waited at the foot of the porch like they belonged there. Sheriff Collins removed his hat first, fingers worrying the brim as if he did not quite know what to do with his hands. Beside him stood a thinner man with clean boots, a stiff collar, and a stack of papers held tight against his chest. His name, Caleb would soon learn, was Deputy Frank Miller, sent from the county seat with authority and little patience for nuance. Caleb stepped forward, positioning himself squarely between the men and the open doorway behind him. Luke stood just inside, small shoulders straight, eyes dark and watchful. The woman hovered in the shadow beyond him, her presence felt even when she did not speak. "What is this about?" Caleb asked. Miller cleared his throat. "We've received concerns, reports of a woman of unsound mind being brought onto this property." "She's my wife," Caleb said evenly. Miller's eyes flicked past him, sharp and appraising. "Your wife died 4 years ago." A silence settled over the yard, thick as heat. The wind stirred the grass. Somewhere in the distance, a horse stamped. Sheriff Collins shifted. "Now, Frank, let's hear him out." "We are hearing him out," Miller replied. "But the county has a responsibility. If she wanders, if she hurts herself or someone else." "She hasn't," Luke said suddenly. Miller looked down at him, startled. "This is grown business, son." Caleb's voice dropped, iron hard. "You will speak to my son with respect, or you will leave." Miller's mouth tightened, but he said nothing. The woman stepped forward then, just enough that her face caught the light. She looked cleaner now, hair brushed, wearing one of Caleb's old shirts belted at the waist. Still, her hands shook as they clutched the doll. Miller's gaze sharpened. "Ma'am, do you know your name?" She hesitated. Her eyes darted to Caleb, then to Luke. Luke swallowed. "It's Evelyn," he said gently. She repeated it, unsure. "Evelyn." Miller nodded as if confirming a suspicion. "You see?" Repeating. Caleb took a step forward. She survived a flood that nearly killed her. She survived hunger and cold and being forgotten. Do not stand here and reduce her to a checklist. Miller bristled. Emotions don't change procedure. Sheriff Collins raised a hand. "Frank, I've seen her in town. She never caused trouble. Folks fed her because she was harmless." "Harmless isn't the same as fit," Miller snapped. At the word fit, Evelyn flinched. Her breathing quickened. She rocked slightly, eyes glazing as panic rose like a tide. "No," she whispered. "No questions." Luke was beside her instantly, slipping his hand into hers. "Look at me," he said, voice steady. "You're home." Caleb watched her chest rise and fall, felt rage coil tight beneath his ribs. He had been good at building fences and balancing books. He had never learned how to protect something this fragile from men who believed rules mattered more than people. Miller tapped his papers. "We need proof. Proof she's who you claim." Caleb laughed once, sharp and humorless. "Proof? You want papers from a woman who lost her mind in a river?" "I want facts," Miller replied. A low sound came from the yard. Midnight, the old black horse stepped out from the barn, ears pricked. He walked straight toward the porch, ignoring the men entirely, until he reached Evelyn. She gasped softly. "Cole," she whispered. Caleb's breath caught. No one but Evelyn had ever called the horse that. Midnight lowered his head, pressing his nose into her palm. He stood still, calm as a held breath. Evelyn's fingers curled into his mane without thought. "He used to steal apples," she said suddenly. "From the pantry. You blame the mice." A ripple went through the watching hands. One of them laughed, startled. "That's true," Ray muttered from near the barn. Evelyn touched the scar on her temple. "I fell off a horse. I cried." Her eyes lifted to Caleb. "You pretended you weren't scared, but your hands shook when you held mine." Caleb could not speak. Sheriff Collins turned slowly toward Miller. "That sound like a stranger guessing?" Miller's jaw worked. He folded his papers with stiff precision. "Fine," he said at last. "Keep her. But if there's trouble..." Caleb stepped down off the porch, close enough that Miller could see the promise in his eyes. "If there's trouble," Caleb said quietly, "it will come from men who think cruelty is the same as order." Miller climbed into the wagon without another word. Sheriff Collins lingered, eyes regretful. Sweetwater should have done better by her. Evelyn nodded once. Not angry, not forgiving, just tired. When they were gone, the yard felt strangely empty. Caleb turned to Evelyn. "Are you all right?" She took a shaky breath. "I'm here," she said. "I'm still here." That afternoon, Caleb did something he had not done since the storm. He saddled 3 horses, and rode into town with Evelyn beside him and Luke between them. Not to hide her, not to ask permission, but to be seen. People stepped out of doorways. Martha pressed a hand to her mouth, tears bright in her eyes. Reverend Hayes paused on the church steps, head bowed. They stopped at the corner by the trading post. Evelyn stared at the dirt where she had rocked and hummed through long, empty days. I thought this was all I had. Caleb's voice was low. I'm sorry I left you here. She looked at him, eyes clearer than they had been before. You didn't know, she said. But you do now. He nodded. Every day. Evelyn looked down at the doll in her arms. Then she held it out to Luke. For you, she said. I don't want it to be my anchor anymore. Luke took it carefully, like glass. I'll keep it safe. When they rode home under the lowering sun, the valley burned gold. Evelyn sat straighter in the saddle. Luke rode close, holding the doll against his chest. Caleb reached for Evelyn's hand. She let him take it. And for the first time since the river, the future did not feel like something to fear. The days that followed did not unfold like a miracle. They moved slowly, unevenly, the way real healing always did. Evelyn woke early most mornings, sitting upright in bed before the sun had fully cleared the hills. Some days she knew where she was the moment her eyes opened. Other days she stared at the ceiling as if it belonged to someone else's house. Caleb learned to read the difference in her breathing before she spoke. On the uncertain mornings, he did not rush her. He simply sat nearby, boots on the floor, presence steady, waiting until she found her footing again. Luke became the quiet rhythm that held them together. He ate breakfast beside her, told her small stories about the animals, showed her how Midnight liked his neck scratched just below the mane. He did not ask questions that demanded answers. He spoke as if the past was something they could walk towards slowly, together. Evelyn wandered the ranch like a guest and a memory at the same time. Some places felt wrong to her, sharp with absence. Others pulled at her without explanation. She paused often, listening, as if the land itself might whisper instructions she could not yet understand. One afternoon, she followed the sound of water to the old trough near the south pasture. The cattle stood knee-deep nearby, tails swishing. When she saw the water shimmering in the sun, her hands began to shake. Caleb noticed at once. It's shallow, he said gently, stopping a few steps away. You're safe. She nodded, but did not move closer. Her breath quickened, eyes unfocused. Luke stepped between them, careful not to touch her. Do you want me to tell you a story? He asked. Evelyn blinked. Yes. Luke told her about a brave horse who once crossed a river even though he was scared, because someone he loved was on the other side. Evelyn listened, rocking slightly, her breathing slowing as the words settled. Caleb watched and felt something inside him give way. He had always believed strength meant control. Now he saw it could mean patience. Not all wounds belonged to Evelyn. At night, when the house was quiet and Luke slept, Caleb sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at his hands. He replayed the storm in his mind, the moment he had turned back, because hope had felt too dangerous to carry. He wondered how many times Evelyn had looked toward the road, waiting for a man who never came. Guilt was not a sharp pain. It was a weight. It pressed down on him in small moments. When Evelyn flinched at raised voices, when she apologized for taking up space, when she asked permission to sit in her own chair. I'm sorry, she said once, after spilling water on the floor. Caleb looked at her, something cracking in his chest. You don't have to apologize for being here. She nodded, but he could see she did not yet believe him. Word traveled through Prescott Hollow faster than Caleb liked. Some people softened, offering casseroles and quiet smiles. Others watched from a distance, curious but wary. Tom Ridley's name came up more than once, usually followed by a shake of the head. One evening, Ray approached Caleb by the barn. "Town's talking," he said carefully. "Some think she won't ever be right." Caleb did not look up from the saddle he was cleaning. "She doesn't need to be right," he said. "She needs to be home." Ray nodded. He did not argue. Evelyn began helping with small tasks, folding laundry, sitting on the porch while Luke carved, watching the hands move cattle from one pasture to another. Sometimes she laughed, surprised by the sound of it. Other times she went quiet for hours, retreating inward without warning. Caleb learned to let her go and come back on her own terms. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the valley amber, Evelyn stood by the fence watching midnight graze. "I don't remember being who you lost," she said softly. Caleb joined her. "I know." Her fingers curled around the rail. "What if I never do?" He took a long breath. "Then I'll learn who you are now." She turned to look at him, searching his face. "You won't resent me?" The question cut deep. "I resent myself," he admitted quietly, "for leaving you alone. But not you. Never you." Evelyn's eyes filled, but she did not cry. She leaned her forehead briefly against the fence, grounding herself. Later that night, thunder rolled in the distance. Evelyn stiffened, hands clutching the edge of the table. Luke looked up from his horse carving. "It's far away," he said. "Just noise." Evelyn nodded, breathing through it. "I'm learning," she whispered. "I don't want to forget again." "You won't," Luke said with certainty only a child could hold. Days turned into weeks. Evelyn began sleeping through the night more often than not. She remembered small things, how she liked her coffee, the way dust smelled after rain, the tune she used to hum while cooking. Some memories came back wrong or sideways, others not at all. Caleb stopped waiting for the moment she would become the woman he remembered. He started noticing the woman she was becoming, gentler, quieter, but strong in ways he had never understood before. One afternoon, Evelyn called Luke to her side and held out the cloth doll. Her hands trembled as she looked at it, eyes clouded with both comfort and pain. "I held this when I didn't know who I was," she said. "It kept me from disappearing." Luke listened carefully. "But I don't want it to be my anchor anymore," Evelyn continued. "I want my anchor to be here." She pressed the doll into Luke's hands. He accepted it solemnly. "I'll take care of it," he promised. Evelyn exhaled, a long breath that seemed to release years of weight. Caleb watched from a few steps away, understanding the significance. She was choosing to move forward, even without all her memories intact. That night, Evelyn sat beside Caleb on the porch. The sky stretched wide above them. "I'm not who I was," she said. He nodded. "I know. But I'm here," she added. Caleb took her hand, steady and sure. "That's enough." In the quiet between them, he knew the hardest part was not behind them. It was waiting. Because when the world saw Evelyn standing strong instead of broken, it would come back with questions, expectations, and demands. And Caleb would have to decide how far he was willing to go to protect the life they were rebuilding, one careful day at a time. The wagon came up the drive just after noon, its wheels cutting slow lines through the dust. Caleb saw it from the porch and felt his shoulders tighten out of habit. But this time the tension did not bloom into fear. It settled instead into something firmer, steadier, like a fence post driven deep enough to hold. Evelyn was in the yard with Luke, hanging damp sheets on the line. The cloth snapped softly in the breeze, bright against the sky. She paused when she noticed the wagon, her hand lingering on the fabric. For a heartbeat, Caleb saw the old flicker of uncertainty pass through her eyes. Then she took a breath and squared her shoulders. "I'm all right," she said before anyone asked. Caleb nodded once. "I know." The wagon rolled closer and stopped. Sheriff Collins climbed down, slower than before, his movements careful. He was alone this time. No papers, no clean-booted men with sharp voices. "I won't stay long," he said, removing his hat. "Just wanted to see how she's doing." Evelyn met his gaze. "I'm home," she said. The words came out simple and solid. Collins studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Looks like it." When he left, the ranch felt quieter than it had in weeks. Not empty. Settled. That afternoon, Caleb did something he had avoided since the storm. He saddled Midnight and offered Evelyn his hand. "Would you ride with me?" She hesitated only a moment before nodding. Luke grinned and mounted his smaller horse, staying close as they set out across the pasture. They rode toward the river at a slow pace, stopping well short of where the banks dipped low. The water moved gently now, narrow and calm, sunlight flashing along its surface. Evelyn watched it from a distance, fingers tight on the reins. "You don't have to," Caleb said. "I know," she replied. "I just want to see it. On my terms." They stood there together, horses breathing beneath them, the land wide and quiet. Evelyn did not approach the water. She did not need to. Seeing it without being swallowed was enough. When they turned back, Luke rode between them, humming softly, the tune Evelyn used to hum without knowing why. She smiled at the sound, surprised, then let herself hum along. The next morning, Caleb saddled 3 horses again. This time, they rode into town. Prescott Hollow looked the same as it always had. Wooden storefronts, dust curling at the edges, the slow rhythm of a place that resisted change. But as they passed down Main Street, doors opened. People stepped out, curiosity plain, some faces softened by recognition. Martha Collins pressed both hands to her mouth when she saw Evelyn sitting tall in the saddle. Tears tracked down her cheeks as she waved. Reverend Hayes removed his hat and bowed his head. They stopped at the corner by the trading post. Evelyn looked down at the ground where she had once sat for hours, rocking and humming, invisible to most of the world. The memory passed over her face like a shadow, then loosened its grip. "I thought this was all I had," she said quietly. Caleb dismounted and stood beside her. "I should have found you sooner." She shook her head. "You found me when you were ready to stay." Luke slid down from his horse and took her hand. "You're not invisible anymore," he said with simple certainty. Evelyn smiled at him, then at the town around her. Some people watched with open kindness. Others looked away, unsure. She did not chase either reaction. She only sat there, present. When they rode back out of town, the sun sat high and warm, the road stretching ahead without urgency. Evelyn rode straighter than she ever had before, the valley opening wide in front of them. That evening, the 3 of them sat on the porch as the sky burned orange and gold. Luke placed the cloth doll on the small table between them, smoothing its worn dress with care. "I keep it for you," he said to Evelyn, "so you don't have to." She nodded, eyes bright. "Thank you." Caleb watched them, something easing in his chest that he had not known was still tight. He thought of the man he had been before the storm, certain, controlled, afraid of hope. That man felt distant now, like a stranger he once shared a name with. I used to think surviving was enough, Caleb said quietly. Evelyn looked at him. And now? Now I think living takes more courage. She reached for his hand. Her fingers were still rough, still marked by years the world had taken from her. But they were warm and sure. Caleb closed his hand around hers without fear that the moment would vanish. Later, when Luke had gone inside and the stars began to prick the sky, Evelyn leaned her head against Caleb's shoulder. I don't remember everything, she said. Some parts may never come back. Caleb kissed the top of her head. We'll make new ones. She smiled, small but real. I'd like that. The night deepened, quiet and kind. The ranch settled into its familiar sounds, the low shift of cattle, the creak of wood, the steady breathing of horses in the dark. Somewhere out there, the river kept moving. No longer a threat, just part of the land. Caleb sat with Evelyn beside him, grounded in the simple truth of her presence. Not perfect, not whole in the way stories often promised, but real, chosen, fought for. And for the first time since the storm, Caleb Hartman allowed himself to believe that what had been broken was not beyond repair. It had simply been waiting for him to come back and stay. I hope you enjoyed this story. Subscribe to my channel so you don't miss touching stories. Leave a like and then comment below what you thought of the emotional stories. See you in the next video.